I'm so excited to chat with Caitlin. She found Helia, and we were so thrilled that she did. And, there's just so many different pieces. But one of the things that she has brilliance in was how do you know when to show up? And I always want to show up. I'm always like, yes, I can help. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And there are times where that makes sense. And it's like, let's go and jump in. And there are times where it makes sense to say, like, let me pause and let me figure out what my role should be here. And Caitlin helped kind of write this beautiful article around that and how to think about those moments and how to kind of make the most of them. And so we're excited to chat with her about it and share the article.
So happy to be here, and I'm thrilled to be part of the Helio community. So thank you for your warm welcome and excited to chat about this.
So I'd love to hear, yeah, just share some experiences about like how this came to be a topic for you. Like, how did this come to be something where you were like, oh, this matters? And so many of us are facing it all the time because our world seems to be full of big moment after big moment after big moment after big moment. And I think we need to be both, judicious and opportunistic and intentional in how we're paying attention. So yeah, how did this become something that you like are passionate about and good at?
Thank you. Yeah, so I've been in the purpose driven workspace for my entire career. So I work with nonprofits mainly, or startups and organizations that are really trying to solve a need or a problem. So I think with that problem solving energy, whenever there's something happening in the world that just feels like it's not just or it's an emergency, it often comes back from the organization's perspective. Is this something that we should chime in on? Is there a way for us to solve this particular need? And with my role always being in more of a marketing or fundraising position, it came down to, should we say something about this? Should this be a social media post? Do we chime in? And what would that look like? So I'm used to having that conversation and thinking about it from the perspective of it's coming from a good place. Usually these questions are, can we solve this? Can we play a part? Can our organization do it? And so I think it's a matter of situational awareness from the organization's perspective and kind of separating, maybe as a person and a being, you want to solve it, but you're representing the organization and the mission and the audience that the fundraising or the marketing is going towards. So playing that tape through, I guess, and thinking about, is this something that makes sense for our organization to talk about? Is the starting point. And when it's a polarizing topic, it's also a matter of, is there actually some reputational risk if we take a swing at saying that we can contribute to a solution that may also upset the audience, or it's actually not something the organization does? So maybe we shouldn't chime in. So that decision making matrix is something that I always think about. Is this appropriate for us to respond to? And is this worth the organization investing in their staff and consultants building,
Mm.
work around this? Is this something that you should even be spending your time doing?
Yeah, I'd love to hear. I love how you think about that, and I'd love to hear more about how folks might approach that, right? Because I think there is that moment of I personally stand for something, right? And if I'm leading an org, where does that come into play, right? My org has values that sort of we stand by and that are really, really important. And where do those come into play? And then also the work that we're doing, right? And the stakeholders that we're engaging with, right? And I don't want to overweight on funders because I think we often do that. But like it's not just funders, right? It's like all the constituents, all the stakeholders, everyone that's in our world and kind of where that is. And those feel hard to balance, right? It's like one thing to just ask myself, but it's another when I think about holistically how to pay attention, yeah, to all those things. And also like, am I adding value to the conversation? Like, if like 400 people are posting something online, is it helpful for me to post that as well? Like maybe, maybe not, or like jumping in and getting in. I don't know. I'm just, yeah. How do you help people think that through?
Mhm. So many layers to that.
So
Yeah,
many layers.
exactly.
I'm
No,
like,
I
it's
think
an easy idea. No big deal.
no big deal. I think it is just trying to take a step back from it personally. That's what I try to do, because you're likely representing an organization when thinking about this. So although personally, we want to solve as many problems as possible. It comes down to what's the mission of this organization and the guiding light and the services that are actually being provided and the promise that the organization has made in its mission. So does chiming in on this topic continue to fulfill a promise to the stakeholders that yes, we're with you in this time of need and this situation makes things more complex, but we're here, we're the anchor, we're the hub. You can trust that we'll be with you and we will provide a solution because you know that we already have in similar situations, or we will continue to fulfill this body of work because of your continued support. So if you can't make a statement like that confidently just at the very start of this discussion, then that's a good stopping place. Like, this is not a topic to pursue if when you're assessing it in the very initial stage, it doesn't feel like it resonates meaningfully with the services that you provide. So I think just having a set of those questions that you go, if yes or no, proceed or stop, before building anything or creating materials or spinning your wheels.
Yeah, when you were saying that, I think when we had our interview, I thought about this too. Like after the Eaton fires in LA, so I live near like Altadena, there were so many different responses, right? And some of them made so much sense, and some of them I was like, what is happening here, right? Like, for example, there's a local park that on the weekends, I think for that area is free, but for everyone else there was a small fee. And after the Eaton fire, they decided to make it just public space for everyone for I don't know how long. I think it still is at this point. And that felt like we offer this service, we have this space, like we want to make this shared in community since our community lost a lot, right? And that felt so beautiful. And there was another group that focused on like behavioral health for elementary school students, and they suddenly became like a renters' rights organization. But they weren't from Altadena. They had never worked in rental rights. They hadn't worked in housing. And it was like, you could tell they were trying to see like, how do we help? Because we have capacity in some way and shape and form. But it also felt, they like didn't have the trust. They didn't have the grounding. They didn't have the space. And it felt like more noise in a space where someone quietly saying like, come and have this space. Made sense, and someone loudly saying we're going to help on rental rights when they hadn't worked with renter rights before. It feels like that could have been paused in that initial questioning.
That is a great example. Exactly. So I think really grounding yourself in what is this organization consistently known for doing well in a programming capacity. So it's more than a transaction between a supporter or a purchaser and the business. It's the relationship between the entities and a trust that, yes, we will fulfill our promise that when you give us this amount of money, we will do an appropriate, we'll create a service offering specifically for this situation, or we are already solving this and will continue to do so. But because this is happening in the news, as you can imagine, there's an elevated need for it now. And so it's above normal. This is an emergency situation, or this is urgent, more so than business as usual.
Mm-hmm. Can you think of a few examples where this was more like gray than black and white, and like how you thought through it, how you watched someone think through it, how you helped someone think through it?
I think when there's a little bit of a middle ground where the situation does impact your core audience, but the organization that you're supporting doesn't fulfill that particular need, that's a bit middle ground. So if there's funding that's been cut for a medical organization, and so there would be people impacted by that, but your mission only supports maybe just a component of that medical aspect, like aftercare, or it's not exactly the surgery or the medicine that's being provided, but you're helping with rehabilitation. And so
Hmm.
there's just an element that the organization supports, but not the holistic solution.
Hmm.
And it's worth considering, is there a partner organization that you could direct people to and say this is a reputable institution that we work with. They solve this entire need. We partner with them just on rehabilitation. And so we would love to direct you to them and say that if you are able to give a donation to our partner, and
Yeah.
then put the spotlight on them rather than your organization, which indirectly will benefit, but um, it could be a better opportunity to shift and advocate for the cause elsewhere.
Yeah. I love that. And I love it so much too. I'm also, it's so interesting because I love what you're saying there as well, is not to stay quiet, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
we're engaged. So I'm going to make a statement. Like I'm going to advocate, I'm going to engage. And I'm also not going to center myself or like my org or the power in it. It's not like I'm a pass through, right? It's like give to us and we'll give to the orgs. Like I've seen people do that, and sometimes that makes sense, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
trusted entity for that. But in the description you're saying, I love, it's like, yeah, I care deeply and I can be part of this because our stakeholders are engaged and relevant and in that space. And this is a trusted partner and we're going to highlight, advocate, and direct right there, not a through.
Right.
That feels great. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you could also include some social proof or examples of pictures of working with that partner. And so you're demonstrating that you have the authority and the reputation to speak to this and that you are contributing as part of the solution, but
Hmm.
maybe it makes more sense and is more appropriate in that elevated time of need to really spotlight and highlight your partner instead of your own organization.
So, I mean, I sort of hear it's like, there's the series of questions you'll ask yourself, right? So it's like, am I, what is my role? Who are my stakeholders? How is this impacting us? Like, what's that position, right? So, some series of questions around that. And if the answer is no on your stakeholders, no on, engagement, no on org, it's okay to sit out, right?
Right.
It's
Yes.
also okay to say, this is part of our values, and so we're going to see what that might look like, right? And if it's part of the value driven, then what it might look like is, who are the people playing that? How could we bring attention to them? How do we support that world? Not trying to engage, but just like direct in some way or highlight those things, or say we're not going to add noise. Like either of those seem fine. Is that a good summary
Exactly.
at that stage? And then if you're in the middle ground, it's maybe there is a responsibility to take action, right? If it is engaging your stakeholders, if it's that space, but that action again is not necessarily doing it. It might be, this is an urgent moment and we need to jump in and we need to run these programs and support, and then with that, raise the money and do the comms around it, right?
Mhm.
If it's not us, then it's how are we taking that responsibility seriously, but maybe centering where the solutions are best held.
Right.
Is that a good
Right.
summary?
Perfect. Yes. And I
Correct me.
think there's
Like,
also a scenario where there's a bit of decision-making paralysis that can happen when you
mm,
aren't able to land in any of those categories, or your stakeholders feel differently about where you should or shouldn't speak to this topic. And
yeah.
so that's a good time to think through what would we imagine our audience would expect right now? Would
Hmm.
they be a little frustrated to not hear from us? Like what I would have expected as a supporter of this organization to hear from you by now. Or are you using the donation that I made 6 months ago for this emergency situation? And so putting yourself in the position of someone else that would be assessing your organization based on your action or inaction can also
Hmm.
help with those discussions if you're stuck.
I love that. Yeah, it's so interesting. I often ask myself, like, how will I feel a year from now about how I acted?
Mm-hmm.
Is
Right.
like a grounding. And I'm realizing as you're talking how selfish that is. Like, it's important, right? Because I think we have to be in alignment with ourselves. And it's like, wow, I'm in a really, regret this. I need to be thoughtful about it, right? Like, am I jumping from an urgency standpoint or a need to help versus like what really is the right thing to do? But I love what you're saying around like, no, think about who you're serving and engaging with and how do we show up for them, right? And
Exactly.
like what do they
Right.
need from us and what from us and expect from us, because it's it's a relationship, right? Like we're in
Mhm.
relationship with all of those humans, and how are we best serving them in this moment?
Right.
Yeah.
And I
I love
think it
that.
becomes just a helpful exercise to conduct, even if your instinct is this trending topic makes no sense for us to speak to, then
Mm,
sharing that with your collaborators and coworkers and saying, hey, I was just thinking about this trending news. I really feel strongly we shouldn't contribute to this discussion because we don't have a say. And then even just running through that playbook and here's how I thought about it and just getting in the habit of having conversations like that with the people you work with so that you all kind of get used to that decision making framework and speak the same language because then you can quickly turn around your answers if you practice that exercise
yeah.
essentially.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Um, yeah, and then you avoid that decision paralysis.
Right, exactly.
Very cool. Do you have any final words of wisdom or guidance or um, yeah, any sort of sparks that you would sort of end our conversation with to sort of share with others?
I think my last piece of advice would be to also just if free yourself from the restrictions of having to follow particular standards and level of effort or how polished the pieces should be in an emergency situation also because I think the audience will be very forgiving of just a text only email or something that's filmed on your phone. It's your CEO speaking to this rather than a fully produced, beautiful message that you're sharing. I
Yeah.
think coming from the heart and just saying, hey, I'm with you. I see that this is happening in our community. Here's what we're thinking right now. We're preparing to respond, or we are assessing our runway to be able to support this. It doesn't have to be a buttoned up, perfect 6 month plan. It can be, we're assessing this situation just like you are. It's changing every day. Here's what we're thinking right now.
That's
Just
so
treat them
helpful.
like they're part of your stakeholder team.
Yeah. Well, I think what I keep hearing from you again is like we're going to center what
Yeah,
others need, and we're going to give ourselves grace, but we also have a responsibility.
right. Exactly.
Mm. Thanks, Caitlin. I really,
Thank
really appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you, Jess.